Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of information and extract the most important nuggets so you walk away feeling truly well-informed. Today, we're plunging into the fascinating world of animal physiology. We're focusing on how mammals, especially those in really frigid environments, adapt and survive. Just think about what it takes for life to thrive where temperatures consistently drop way below freezing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff. We've got a really detailed chapter here from Animal Physiology by Hill, Wise, and Anderson as our source material. And our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the core physiological concepts. We'll look at the ingenious mechanisms animals use, the systems involved.
And we're always looking at those comparative strategies, right? How different animals tackle similar problems.
Exactly. Comparative strategies, the adaptive significant, like why these adaptations matter for survival, and also the experimental methods. How do we actually know this stuff?
Right, the science behind the discoveries.
Precisely.
Yep.
And we'll bring in plenty of real-world biological examples to, make these concepts really come alive for you.
Okay, prepare for some aha moments, I think. We're exploring the extremes of nature and the incredible science behind them. Let's dig in. The resilience of reindeer, surviving the Arctic cradle to grave. So we're starting with maybe the ultimate Arctic survivor, the reindeer, and what a newborn reindeer calf faces. It's just astonishing right from its very first breath.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine this. You go from a cozy 37 degrees Celsius inside mom,
Nice and warm.
and suddenly you're plunged into air that could be -3 degrees C. That's a 40-degree drop, sometimes even 50 or 60 degrees colder.
And they're born wet, right, in the wind.
Born wet, often a strong wind whipping across the tundra.
Yeah.
And what's more, these calves are incredibly precocial.
Meaning they're kind of like miniature adults.
Exactly. They're remarkably mature from day one. They stand up almost immediately. They can outrun a person at just 2 days old
2 days, that's wild.
and swim across rivers within a week. There's no huddling in a nest or resting. They have to thermoregulate, control their body temperature instantly, or they just won't make it.
So how on earth do they do it? And how does that connect to the adults? The text calls adult reindeer probably the most adapted of all inland mammals to cold exposure. That's a big claim.
It is, but it seems justified. They even enable other species, including indigenous cultures like the Sami people, to survive up there by providing food and those crucial insulating pelts.
Amazing. So the adults, they must have incredible insulation.
They really do.
Yeah.
Adult reindeer have an incredibly lower critical temperature. It's around -30 Celsius, maybe even lower if there's no wind.
Okay, what does lower critical temperature mean exactly?
It's basically the temperature below which an animal has to start actively increasing its metabolic rate, burning more energy just to stay warm.
So for reindeer, down to -30 C, they're kind of just coasting.
Pretty much. They rarely need to significantly boost their metabolism above their baseline, even when Arctic temperatures plummet to -50 C.
Wow. And compare that to us.
Yeah, for a naked human, that lower critical temp is like 24 to 27 degrees above zero. So reindeer's comfy at -30 when we'd be freezing in, a cool room.
That really puts it in perspective. So a huge part of that has to be their fur, their pelage.
Absolutely. It's key. They have this really dense underfur and then these longer guard hairs over top.
And those guard hairs are special, aren't they?
They are. They're filled with tiny, motionless air spaces. Think of it like microscopic bubble wrap. It provides exceptional insulation.
Like a built-in down jacket.
Exactly. And in winter, their fur can be, 3 or 4 centimeters thick over most of their body. It even covers their nose.
Okay, but it's not just the fur. You mentioned something called regional heterothermy.
Right. That's another crucial adaptation. Their bodies are clever. They keep the core, the important organs, nice and warm, but they allow the extremities, like their legs, to get much, much colder.
Okay, that makes sense for saving energy, but doesn't that cause problems? Like, wouldn't the fats in their cold legs stiffen up, like butter in the fridge?
That's the fascinating part. You'd think so, but no. The lipids, the fats, in those outer, colder parts actually have different chemical structures. They're designed to stay fluid, like oil, even when the temperature gets close to freezing, near 0 degrees C.
So they change their own body chemistry.
Essentially, yes. It's called homeoviscous adaptation. They maintain the right viscosity, the right fluidity in their cell membranes across these different temperature zones in their body.
How do we know that? What's the evidence?
Well, studies have looked at the fatty acid composition. They find more of things like oleic acid, which is an unsaturated fat, in the marrow of the lower limbs.
The runnier kind of fat.
Exactly. And less of the saturated fatty acids, the ones that solidify more easily, like palmitic and stearic acid. And interestingly, This isn't just a reindeer thing. You see similar adaptations even in some tropical mammals. It seems to be a fundamental physiological trick.
The reindeer diet.
Okay, so they've got the insulation and the body temperature management sorted.
Hmm.
But surviving the Arctic isn't just about staying warm. It's also about finding food, right?
Mm.
Especially in winter. How do they fuel themselves?
That's the other massive challenge. Reindeer are ruminants, like cows or sheep, meaning they have that complex stomach system for digesting tough plant material. And their digestive system is absolutely key.
They eat.
Yeah.
What can they eat up there?
They have an incredibly diverse diet, actually. The text mentions 37 different genera of plants, but a huge part of it, especially in winter, is lichens. You often hear it called reindeer moss.
Right, I've heard of that.
And get this, they get about twice the nutrient value from those lichens compared to what sheep or cows can extract.
Oh.
It's partly down to their specialized gut microbes. Some lichens actually contain toxic compounds, like something called assimilant acid. But the reindeer's rumen microbes break it down before it gets absorbed into their system.
Wow, built-in detoxifiers. And the seasons are so extreme there.
Mm-hmm.
Winter isn't just cold, it's dark for months. The food situation must change drastically.
Dramatically. Summer food is relatively rich, more protein, minerals, easily digestible carbs. But winter? Winter is lichen season. It can make up over 80% of their diet then.
And lichen isn't exactly nutritious, is it?
Not really. It's low in protein, low in several minerals, low in those easily digestible carbs. But it is high in things like cellulose and hemicellulose, tough, fibrous stuff. It really highlights the huge nutritional stress these wild animals face.
So their bodies have to adapt, and even their gut bacteria have to change with the seasons.
Precisely. Reindeer put on a lot of fat before winter, building up those energy reserves. And yes, their rumen microbial community totally shifts. In winter, the microbes that are good at digesting woody, fibrous material, including cellulose from the lichens, become much more common.
They become better at eating the winter food.
They can become 4 to 6 times more efficient at breaking down lichens if they've been eating them consistently. But even with all these adaptations, it's tough. They often lose a lot of body weight over the winter, can become quite emaciated.
And you can see signs of deficiency.
Yeah, by spring, they often show signs of mineral deficiency. They develop strong mineral appetites, actively seeking out sources of minerals they've been missing.
And beyond just their internal workings, their behavior is critical too.
Oh, absolutely. Those legendary migrations are a perfect example. The herds are constantly moving, searching for food, covering huge distances every day.
How far are we talking?
Annual migrations can easily be 1,000 kilometers. Some herds in Alaska and the Yukon do a round trip of 5,000 kilometers a year.
5,000 kilometers. That's incredible.
They are the greatest distance migrators among walking or running animals. And you have to remember those calves we talked about, the newborns. They have to keep up with these demanding movements almost from birth. The science of newborn thermoregulation. Unpacking brown fat.
Which brings us right back to those incredible newborns. You mentioned they're born wet and cold, but the source says their pelage, their fur, is actually pretty well developed.
It is. It's woolly, the hairs are hollow like the adults, and it provides substantial insulation as soon as it dries. That's a crucial first step.
And physiologically, how do they generate heat?
Right from birth, they show what's called a typical homeothermic response. They can crank up their metabolic heat production to at least twice their resting rate.
So the fur plus the internal furnace.
Exactly. That combination allows them to keep their core body temperature up around 39, 40 degrees C, even if the air is minus 20 or minus 25 C for several hours. It's a remarkable feat, maybe the peak of thermoregulatory ability for any terrestrial newborn.
Still vulnerable, though, you said.
Oh, yes. Extreme cold or being wet or strong winds, those can still overwhelm them. They're tough, but not invincible.
And their rapid growth helps, too, right? As they get bigger, it's easier to stay warm.
Yes, definitely. Their ability to cope with cold improves week by week. By the time they're 2 weeks old, they only need about 70% of the heat production they needed at birth to stay warm at minus 20 C.
And the mother's milk must be important for that growth.
Hugely important. It's incredibly energy dense. About 20% lipid or fat. That's roughly 3 times the energy value of cow's milk. Plus, it's rich in protein. That milk, combined with the fact they start eating vegetation really early, fuels that rapid growth. And that growth is critical for surviving their first migration.
Okay, so back to that instant heat production in newborns. What's the physiological secret? Shivering.
Not primarily, no. At least not at first. The main mechanism is something called non-shivering thermogenesis, or NST.
Non-shivering heat production.
Right, and it's mainly done by a special tissue called brown fat, or brown adipose tissue, BAT. This is the main heat-generating tissue in most newborn placental mammals, including humans.
Brown fat. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How did scientists figure out that was the key? How do we know it's brown fat doing the work?
That's a great example of applying different experimental methods, sort of building the case piece by piece.
Okay, walk us through it.
Well, first, just looking at it under a microscope, they saw tissue, especially between the shoulder blades, that was reddish-brown. It was packed with mitochondria, the energy factories of the cell, and each cell had lots of small fat droplets, not one big one like normal white fat. That's called multilocular.
So the structure looked different, looked like it might be specialized for generating heat.
Exactly. Rich in mitochondria suggests high metabolic activity. Lots of small droplets suggests fat is readily available to be burned. But, appearance isn't always definitive proof. Structure alone isn't 100% reliable.
So they needed functional evidence.
Precisely. They moved on to function. Now, we know brown fat activation is triggered by the sympathetic nervous system using the signal norepinephrine.
Okay.
So the experiment was inject norepinephrine under the skin of a newborn reindeer. And what happened? A big spike in oxygen consumption.
Indicating a surge in metabolic activity and heat production.
Directly indicating brown fat function, because that's norepinephrine's known effect on brown fat. But even that test has some limitations. It's not perfectly specific.
So there was a third level of proof needed, maybe molecular.
You got it. The third, and really unambiguous test, relies on a unique molecular marker, a protein called uncoupling protein 1, or UCP1.
UCP1.
And that's special. It's believed to occur only in brown fat cells. It's the protein that actually uncouples the energy-burning process in mitochondria from making ATP, the usual cell fuel, and instead releases that energy directly as heat.
So if you find UCP1, you found brown fat.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Scientists developed antibodies that specifically bind to UCP1. They applied these antibodies to tissue samples from newborn reindeer, and guess what? All the major adipose tissue deposits reacted strongly. Confirmation. It's brown fat.
That's clever. Using a specific protein signature.
It is, and it's also how we know, for example, that pigs don't have functional brown fat. Their UCK1 gene has mutations. It doesn't work.
Fascinating. But this powerful brown fat,
Yeah.
it doesn't stick around for long in reindeer, does it?
No, it declines quite quickly. That's typical for large-bodied species, like reindeer and humans. In ruminants like reindeer, it's practically gone by the time they're a month old. The UCP1 gene just stops being expressed.
So what takes over for heat production then?
Shivering. As that non-shivering capacity fades, shivering becomes the main way they generate extra heat. And in reindeer, that transition happens fast. By 1 month old, shivering is their primary tool if they get cold.
Wow. So it's like a temporary superpower they have at birth.
Yeah.
But how does the body prepare this before they're even born? How does that brown fat develop?
That's another layer of sophistication. Fetal development plays a key role. There were some neat experiments done with pregnant sheep, which are physiologically quite similar in this respect.
What do?
They took some pregnant ewes and sheared off their wool late in pregnancy. This exposed them to cold, simulating a kind of environmental stress.
Okay, and the lambs?
The lambs born to those cold-stressed shorn ewes had more brown fat at birth, and they relied less on shivering initially.
So the mother's experience in the cold influenced the fetus's development.
It suggests that, yes, the intrauterine environment can prime the development of brown fat, making sure the newborn has enough NST capacity ready for that chilly entry into the world.
That's amazing pre-programming. But wait, you wouldn't want the fetus burning up all its energy reserves as heat inside the nice warm uterus, would you?
Excellent point. That would be incredibly wasteful. And indeed, it doesn't happen. If you experimentally cool near-term sheep fetuses while they're still inside the uterus, they don't activate their brown fat.
So there's an off switch.
There seems to be. The current thinking is that the placenta produces signaling molecules, likely things called prostaglandins, that actively inhibit brown fat activation before birth.
So the placenta keeps it suppressed.
Right. And then at birth, when the umbilical cord is cut, that inhibitory signal is removed. Suddenly, the brown fat is free to respond vigorously to the cold stimulus of the outside world. It's thought a similar mechanism is probably at play in reindeer, too.
Comparative thermoregulation.
Okay, this focus on reindeer is fascinating, but let's broaden out a bit. When you look across different mammals, what really strikes you about how body size shapes these strategies for surviving the cold?
Oh, size is hugely important. It really dictates the options available to an animal. It raises the question, is there one single best way to deal with cold? And the answer is definitely no. Size creates this fundamental trade-off, really, between relying on physiological adaptations versus behavioral ones.
So take our reindeer again and compare it to something tiny, like a white-footed mouse. They both stay warm, they're both mammals, but are they doing it the same way?
Not at all. Completely different approaches, largely driven by size. Think about the newborn reindeer again. It's relatively large.
Which limits its behavior, you said.
Exactly. It can't easily burrow or hide away on the open tundra, so it has to meet the cold challenge physiologically with that great fur, the brown fat, the regional heterothermy. Luckily, being larger also means it has a better surface area to volume ratio. It loses heat less readily than something small.
Okay, makes sense. But the tiny white-footed mouse.
Newborn mice are minuscule, smaller than your little finger, born naked and helpless. Physiologically, they just don't have the capacity, they couldn't possibly evolve the internal machinery to thermoregulate effectively if they were fully exposed.
So they rely on behavior.
Entirely. Well, mostly. Their small size allows them to use highly protective microhabitats. The mother builds a well-insulated nest, usually hidden away in a burrow or crevice. So for the mouse pup, warmth comes mainly from those behavioral provisions, the nest, the mother's body heat.
And this size-driven difference in strategy, it continues into adulthood.
Absolutely. Small mammals that don't hibernate, like lemmings, often survive the harsh winter by living under the snowpack. The snow provides insulation.
They can't face the wind and cold above ground.
Right. But large mammals, like our adult reindeer, are physiologically better equipped for the cold surface conditions because of their size. Remember that lower critical temp below -30°C. But they can't burrow under the snow.
So their main behavioral option is
Migration. Moving to find better conditions, maybe areas with less wind or more accessible food. And migration is much more energetically feasible for a large animal than a small one.
uh,
So you see this pattern. As winter hits, the little guys tend to go underground or under snow, while the big guys often get out, they migrate. The deep sleep. Unveiling hibernation.
Okay, so migration is one strategy, but another incredible way animals deal with winter is hibernation, that deep sleep state. And you mentioned brown fat comes back into the picture here for adults.
Yes, it does. In species that hibernate, unlike reindeer, brown fat is often retained into adulthood, and it plays an absolutely critical role during arousal, waking up from hibernation.
How so?
The intense heat production, the thermogenesis, needed to warm the body back up from near freezing to normal temperatures. That's primarily driven by brown fat, especially at the very start of the arousal process.
And where is this brown fat located in hibernators?
It's often strategically placed, like around the major arteries in the chest and between the shoulder blades. This means the heat it generates is delivered very efficiently to the most vital organs. First, the heart, the lungs, the brain, helping them warm up and restore function quickly.
It's amazing. But hibernation itself, it happens underground, out of sight. How have we learned so much about what actually goes on during this period?
Technology has been absolutely key there. There's been a real revolution over the last, say, 50 years. Biologists teamed up with engineers, computer scientists.
To develop ways to monitor animals remotely.
Exactly. Things like tiny implantable radio transmitters that send out signals about body temperature or miniature data loggers that record temperature over long periods. These can be implanted in the animals.
Allowing continuous tracking even when they're hidden away hibernating?
Precisely. It allowed scientists to get continuous long-term records of body temperature and other physiological data from animals living freely in the wild. That was impossible before.
That must have completely changed the game.
It absolutely did. Getting a graph showing, say, an Arctic ground squirrel's body temperature fluctuating over 8 months of continuous hibernation in its burrow, that kind of detailed picture was unthinkable previously.
Okay, speaking of Arctic ground squirrels you mentioned earlier, they face incredibly cold burrows, right? In permafrost. How do they even survive if the ground around them drops way below freezing?
Yeah, that's another fascinating puzzle. They live in permafrost regions, so they can't dig burrows deeper than about a meter, and the soil temperature down there can drop to -25°C.
But their body fluids would freeze solid at just below zero, wouldn't they?
Right, their freezing point is around -0.6°C. Yet, remarkably, sometimes their body temperature will actually dip below freezing down to maybe -2 or -3°C, and they don't freeze solid. They super cool.
Super cool, like some insects or fish do.
Exactly like some poikilotherms or cold-blooded animals, yeah.
Hmm.
They manage to keep their body fluids liquid even below their freezing point. It's risky, but they can do it, at least for short periods.
But they don't just rely on supercooling, do they? They still regulate their temperature somewhat.
Yes, they absolutely do, even while hibernating. When the soil around them gets profoundly cold, they actually increase their metabolic heat production.
Using that brown fat again.
Using that brown fat thermogenesis, yes, they actively generate heat to keep their body temperature significantly above the freezing soil temperature, maybe 10 degrees C higher, even while still in deep hibernation.
So they defend a minimum body temperature even if it's just above freezing.
Correct. It prevents them from getting too cold and potentially freezing, but it does come at a cost. It reduces the overall energy savings they get from hibernating because they're having to burn fuel periodically to stay just warm enough.
The critical role of lipids.
Okay, so hibernation saves energy, but it still requires fuel, especially for those rewarming periods. And before they even go into hibernation, they need to store that fuel. We talked about reindeer fattening up.
Same idea for hibernators, but maybe even more critical. They accumulate huge stores of white fat before winter. This fat is mostly made of molecules called triacylglycerols.
And the type of fat matters.
Right.
Right, just like with the reindeer legs.
Absolutely. The composition of that stored fat, which reflects the fatty acids they got from their diet, turns out to be really important. We're talking about the balance of saturated fats, SFAs, monounsaturated fats, MUFAs, and polyunsaturated fats, PUFAs.
And mammals can't make all types of fatty acids themselves.
Right. Particularly most PUFAs, things like omega-3s and omega-6s, they have to get those from the plants they eat.
So what was the initial thinking about fat type and hibernation?
Well, the basic idea was about fluidity. Fats rich in saturated fatty acids, like, beef fat, tend to solidify when they get cold.
Like the butter in the fridge example.
Exactly. Whereas fats rich in PUFAs and MUFAs tend to stay liquid at much lower temperatures. So the hypothesis was, if you need to mobilize and metabolize your fat stores while your body is cold during hibernation, you'd want fats that stay fluid.
So PUFA-rich diets should be better for hibernators.
That was the prediction. And a lot of experimental evidence backs this up.
Like that chipmunk study mentioned in the text.
Yes, that's a classic example. They fed groups of chipmunks diets that were identical except for the type of fat. One group got PUFA-rich fat, the other got SFA-rich fat.
And the results.
The chipmunks on the PUFA-rich diet were more likely to enter hibernation in the first place. When they did hibernate, they could tolerate lower body temperatures, they had lower metabolic rates during hibernation bouts, and the bouts lasted longer, all pointing to more effective, energy-saving hibernation.
Wow, so the quality of the fat stores really makes a difference.
Yeah.
But it gets even more specific than just PUFAs versus SFAs, doesn't it?
It does. This is where the research is really pushing the boundaries now. It seems not all PUFAs are created equal when it comes to hibernation.
Okay.
Recent work, for instance, on alpine marmots, suggests that having a high percentage of omega-6 PUFAs in their white fats, specifically omega-6s, not necessarily omega-3s, correlates with better hibernation outcomes, meaning lower body temperatures during hibernation and less overall weight loss during the winter. So more efficient energy saving.
Why would omega-6s be particularly good? What's the theory?
The current working hypothesis is that it relates back to cell membranes again. The idea is that omega-6 PUFAs might provide a better lipid environment, a better matrix for certain critical membrane proteins to function correctly when the cell is very cold.
Like proteins involved in heart function.
Exactly. One key protein is a calcium pump in heart muscle cells, which is essential for regulating heart contractions. The thought is that the right lipid environment, maybe provided by omega-6s, helps this pump and other proteins work reliably and stably, even when the heart is beating very slowly and is very cold during hibernation. The unanswered questions of hibernation, arousals, and social dynamics.
Okay, so hibernation is clearly a massive energy saver overall. But then there's this weird thing, these periodic arousals. They actually wake up sometimes during the winter.
They do. And it's one of the biggest mysteries in hibernation biology. They don't just wake up a little bit, they typically warm all the way back up to normal body temperature for several hours or even a day before cooling back down into hibernation.
But that must cost a ton of energy, right?
Yeah.
Undoing all the savings.
It costs an enormous amount of energy. For some species, like Richardson's ground squirrels, estimates suggest that over 80%, of all the energy they burn over the entire winter is spent just on these periodic arousals.
80%. That seems completely counterproductive.
It does. For alpine marmots, it's maybe slightly less, but still around 2/3 of their total winter energy budget goes to waking up periodically. It really begs the question, why on earth do they pay such a high energy price for this? What's the benefit?
I mean, maybe they just need to, pee or something.
That was an early idea that they needed to wake up to eliminate metabolic wastes. But that doesn't seem to fully explain the frequency or the extent of the arousals. The energy cost seems way too high for just that.
So if it's not just waste removal, what are the leading theories now?
Well, there are a few prominent hypotheses that have some experimental support, but still no definite consensus. One idea is that it's related to the brain.
How so?
Being very cold for long periods, the hyperthermia of hibernation might cause some deterioration in brain structures, like the connections between neurons, the dendrites, and synapses. So perhaps waking up periodically allows the brain to kind of repair itself, restore those connections.
Okay, that's one possibility. What else?
Another major hypothesis focuses on the immune system. Immune function is generally suppressed at very low body temperatures. Waking up periodically might allow the animal to reestablish normal immune responses, maybe fight off any pathogens or infections that might have taken hold during the hibernation bout.
Interesting. So brain maintenance or immune system tune-ups, but we don't know for sure yet.
Not definitively. It's still a really active area of research trying to figure out the true why behind these costly arousals.
Okay, moving beyond the physiology. How does hibernation impact an animal's life overall? Survival, reproduction.
Well, for survival, it's generally a huge plus. Studies show that animals are much, much less likely to die when they're hibernating compared to when they're active, maybe 5 times less likely per month.
Mostly because they're hidden from predators.
That's a big part of it, yes. They're tucked away, less vulnerable. It definitely affects reproduction, though.
How does pregnancy fit in? Can an animal be pregnant and hibernate? Seems unlikely.
That was the traditional assumption, yeah. The hibernation and pregnancy were incompatible because of the energy demands. But biology always has surprises.
Oh.
Back in 2006, researchers actually observed hoary bats, a species of bat entering deep hibernation torpor for several days at a time while they were in advanced stages of pregnancy, and they later gave birth normally.
Wow. So it can happen.
It seems it can, at least in some species, some circumstances. Maybe arousals are more frequent during pregnancy, but it's not an absolute barrier anymore.
What about the males? How does hibernation affect their reproductive readiness?
It has a pretty stark effect, especially in animals like ground squirrels. Their tests actually regress, they shrink during hibernation.
They become non-functional.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And they can't start regrowing and becoming functional again until the animal's body temperature is restored to normal after hibernation ends.
So they need time to get ready after waking up.
Exactly. Full reproductive development can take several weeks after they emerge, which is why, in many ground squirrel species, the males actually emerge from hibernation weeks before the females do. It gives them that head start to be ready for mating when the females finally appear.
Clever timing. Okay, one last aspect. Social hibernation. You mentioned marmots hibernating in groups.
Yes, many species of marmots, like the alpine marmot, hibernate socially, sometimes in groups of up to 20 individuals in a single burrow.
What's the advantage of huddling together like that?
It significantly increases individual survival, especially for the younger animals, the juveniles. Huddling together provides better insulation collectively. Everyone loses less heat, so they need to burn less of their own fat reserves to stay warm enough.
Makes sense. Safety in numbers and warmth in numbers.
Exactly. But what's really remarkable, and was discovered partly thanks to that remote monitoring technology we talked about, is the synchrony of their arousals.
The periodic wake-ups. They do it together.
The adults and subadults in a social group usually arouse from hibernation in very close synchrony. They start warming up around the same time.
How does it help?
By warming up together, they mutually warm each other through body heat. This actually lowers the individual energy cost for each animal to get back up to normal temperature compared to if they were arousing alone.
That's amazing coordination. How do they even initiate that when they're basically comatose?
That's part of the mystery. It's fascinating. And interestingly, the juveniles, the young ones, often lag behind. They seem to let the older, larger animals do the initial hard work of warming the burrow, and then they arouse, benefiting from the warmth already generated.
Smart freeloading.
You could call it that. And this synchrony, or lack thereof, has real consequences.
How so?
Studies have shown that individuals in groups that arouse with high synchrony lose significantly less body weight over the winter, maybe 20–25% loss, compared to 40–45% loss in groups that are poorly synchronized.
That's a massive difference, directly impacting their chances of surviving the winter.
Absolutely. It highlights this really vivid interplay between social behavior, sociobiology, and the physiology of hibernation. From a purely selfish perspective, an adult marmot might actually do better for its own survival by hibernating alone or avoiding juveniles. But for the success of its genes for the next generation, it needs those juveniles to survive, too. It's a fascinating balance.
Wow. What a journey through some truly incredible adaptations. From the microscopic structure of reindeer fur and fat.
To the complex energy budgets and social dynamics of hibernating marmots.
It really gives you a fresh perspective on how life manages to thrive in environments that seem utterly hostile to us. You've really walked us through how body size matters, how internal chemistry like fat composition is crucial.
And how scientists actually figured this stuff out, right? Using everything from microscopes to molecular markers like UCP1 and those remote tracking technologies that let us see what animals are doing when we can't directly observe them.
So, thinking about all this, the supercooling squirrels, the synchronized marmot wake-ups, the newborn reindeer hitting the ground running, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Makes you wonder what else is out there.
Exactly. What other seemingly impossible survival strategies are hidden away in the natural world, just waiting for the right curious minds and maybe the next generation technology to uncover them? Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope you feel more well-informed and maybe inspired to look for some of that hidden science in the world around you.